study special meeting of the Governing Board of the Cave Creek Unified School District number 93. Today's Monday, July 13th, 2020. Roll call. The 5 members of the Governing Board are present. Item 1.3, formal adoption of the agenda. Okay. Item 1.3, formal adoption of the agenda. I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda as amended. I'd like it to go after the pledge of course. I'd like to move item 3.1 ahead of item 2.2. So it'd be 2.1, 3.1, 2.2, 3.2. So I move that we adopt it as amended.
Second.
So moved.
Is that Janet? I'm sorry, Janet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. It's
do I have a second?
Second, Rich.
Okay. So this is to adopt the agenda as amended as 2.1, 3.1, 2.2, 3.2. Member Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Member Hatcher?
Aye.
Member Busby?
aye.
Member Brown?
Aye.
Okay, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, as we always do at your own pace. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Catherine, before we start, could I
Yeah.
ask that everybody turn their mic off when they're not talking so that there's not like a,
Oh, all the movement.
all the
The paper
background
sounds.
noise?
Okay,
Yes.
yes, everyone mute yourselves, especially 2.1 and 2.2 are going to be presentations, so they can probably be muted for a while. Item 2.1, ASBA Superintendent Transitions Presentation, presented by myself and Mr. Steve Hyland, ASBA Executive Search and Senior Policy Consultant. Sorry guys, I got to move some stuff. I'm actually just introducing this. Mr. Hyland is going to do the presentation. He is from ASBA, Arizona School Board Association, and he is an executive search and senior policy consultant, and he is going to give us an overview on the search process for a superintendent and have any questions. So this is a question and answer. It's not a voting. This is a presentation. So Mr. Hyland, we're ready for you. I think, can we see him? Mr. Hyland, you're muted, just so you know.
Okay, Mark, do you have my video turned off?
No, sir. We see your screen. You haven't shared anything yet.
Oh, okay. I was looking for, all I have on my screen for me is an S. So I was just looking for me. So you
Start
can
your video.
That's a good thing. Okay, well, good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you this afternoon. As Catherine said, there are a couple of things we want to share with you. The first order of business is really a PowerPoint that I believe you received in your packet. I don't know if you've had a chance to go over it yet, but it looks like this. Okay, is that up on my screen, Mark?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the intent of the PowerPoint is just to give you an overview of what this is all about in terms of the superintendent search. It's not a overly complex process, but it is an intense process. And it taxes a board, quite honestly, because you're poised in a position now where you need to make a very important decision, and that is, what is the leadership administrative-wise in terms of the superintendent going to be in the future? And that's a tough place to be, especially if you've had a superintendent in place for quite a while, as you have. Moving to a new person to be the leadership, so to speak, of the administration in the district and to report directly to you and work with you is a awesome challenge. But one of the things that we've done at ASBA is to try to make this as simple as possible by guiding you. And by using ASB, if you choose to use this, what you're doing is you're putting the burden on us to make it right. The burden on you is always the decision making. So with that, our first slide, very simply, ask a question. It's a pretest. And if you've looked at slide 3, you already know the answer to this. But the question is, Of all of these things, and this is only 9 examples, what out of this list do you have to place as a necessary requirement for your superintendent? Anyone want to join in on that one?
I cheated and saw the fingerprint card.
That's okay. You want to give everybody the answer then, Catherine?
It's a fingerprint card.
Yeah. With all these things, earned doctorate degree, understanding of public school budgets, background in public school curriculum, exceptional community, those are all great things. But the law is real simple. ARS 15503 said superintendents, principals, head teachers, psychologists, terms of employment, that's the title. A1 very simply says employment, a superintendent, a principal, or both. If the governing board employs a superintendent, the governing board shall determine the qualifications of the superintendent by action at a public meeting. So when you look at the list of things, all those things are good, but the only thing they have to have is a valid fingerprint card, number 9. And why is this the case? It didn't used to be. The law used to be a little more definitive in regards to a superintendent and the position, but 5-6 years ago, our legislators talked through this and said, really, if a person can run a big organization, if they have their own business, if they've got experience, they ought to be able to run a district. So let's just turn it over to the board of each district, make it a local control thing, let them decide. So one of the things that you will do during this process, in particular to the position itself, is you'll have to have that discussion. What is it you're looking for? What are the basics of the position and the person that you want? What are they going to look like? What are they going to bring to the table? Is it an effort? Yeah, it certainly is an effort. Because I will tell you the first 3 items on this in terms of questions that may come up, you don't have an answer that can tell you that you're on the right track yet. Is your board collectively and individually ready? I know I haven't met with you, but I know if I met with each of you individually and I asked you specific questions, you wouldn't have the same answers. And this isn't something that you have to have an absolute definitive answer for up front, because this is a project that grows through time and things change. What you think today may be not what you think tomorrow. But our effort is to work in a collective individual fashion, challenge our direction, challenge our thoughts, and move forward. Are we all on the same page right now? No, you're not, even though I haven't met with you, as I said. I know you're not on the same page. And which direction is best for the district? I don't know, with the exception of pick the right person. When I say you don't know that I know you're not on the same page, it's because no district board is at this point. It's a process that takes time and effort to work through, and it's a growing process. Who's out there to help us? Well, ASBA is if you choose to work with us. How do we know we're on the correct path? We know that our program works for boards, but it also needs to move with boards, and every board has a different reflection of where they need to head. So our path may change. It's not a straight line from A to B here. We're going to be looking at a number of different options as we move through this. And as we do, your thoughts may change as to where we want to head and where you as a board want to go. So it's a moving target. Where do we find the best person? Well, our recommendation is that you always should advertise nationwide. Get as many people to apply as possible. Give yourselves as much room as you can to make the right decision. The last thing we want to do is back you into a corner. And there's a number of ways we can do that without realizing it. And it's part of our job at ASBA to make sure you don't back yourself into a corner with this. When do we make the decision? Well, we'll have a timeline that we would work with, and we'll establish that timeline with the idea that it moves also, because you do not make a decision until you're ready to make a decision. That's imperative. Just because the calendar says we're going to make a decision on November 1st of 2020, that's great. But if you're not ready, you don't make a decision. And as we move through this, I will make sure to tell you if I feel like you're moving too fast or you're making a decision without all the necessary parts and pieces together. The timeline, we're going to go over that in a little while, but if you do a full search, it's a 12, 14-week process, maybe even 16, depending on components that you would choose if you want to do. Why is it a formal process? Well, formal because we want to get it right, and also fair labor practices and making sure that you are transparent in the work you do, and making sure that we communicate with your community and make sure that everything is done right, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Is there a cost? Yes. If you work with ASBA or any agent that helps with these types of services, there is a cost. We'll get to that in a little bit. With that in mind, instead of pulling against each other and against the system as these two folks here are, we want to make it a process where we pull together. And there's certain roles and responsibilities that I would have and that you will have. We need to talk about that. There's a timeline, there's a position profile we've talked about. We have to talk about salaries and benefits to a point. Of course, that will be worked out in the end with your attorney when you write a contract, but we have to have a basic idea of salary in regards to that to get started with. Advertising and recruiting, that remains our responsibility. Screening applicants, we would do a pre-screening, but you will do the primary screening. And one of the things that that we do that's different than some other search agents is sometimes you'll hear an external search agent say, well, we've got 86 candidates. We're going to bring you the top 10. We bring you everyone who applies because we're not going to narrow the field down by our judgment. Now, that said, I will provide you my thoughts regarding each candidate, but you'll make the decision which candidates best fit your needs. With that in mind, there's also interview preparation. There's different types of interviews that can be done. We need to be prepared for it. We need to be ready. We don't go in there cold. We have a direction. We have some specific idea what we're looking for. And you need to feel comfortable with that process when we get to the interview, interviewing candidates. What's going to be the participation level of your community? There's several ways to do that, which we'll talk about along the way. Decision-making, as I mentioned, is all yours. Contract negotiations are yours with your attorney, and it's important to have your attorney involved right from the start on this. And then the transition plan is how are you going to go from the superintendent you have now to a new superintendent? And with that in mind, it's important to remember that you have a certain comfort level with your current superintendent. She's been there quite a while. You all know her. You kind of all know where she's going to go with something, and she knows how you're going to work with something. That's not going to be true with the new person coming in. It's a growing process. You have to learn who each other is, and it takes time. So one of the things, if you go with us as part of the transition plan, we offer an opportunity to meet with our trainers, to work with them, to work with the board, to work with the new superintendent, to have that transition plan in place. Roles, goals, responsibility, communication. Those are all things that you need to speak to during that transition plan. The roles and responsibilities, going back to that in terms of ASBA, I'm not going to read all these things to you, but we basically do all the background work. We get all the answers from you. We get all the information we need from you. And then we set a course to get it advertised. We set a course to get the applications in. We are the ones that people communicate. Even from your community, it's important to remember that we should speak with one voice, and we believe that should come from ASBA at this point for one primary reason, if nothing else, and that is sometimes you'll get, especially in the community, you know folks, people see in the market, people see at the store, they'll start talking to you, and you don't want to be backed into a corner. So it's best if you refer everything to us. It's good to listen to folks, but you want to be careful not to commit to folks because you don't know where you're headed till you get there. And then confidentiality is most important on this because there's a degree of confidentiality with each of the applicants. We're dealing with their lives, we're dealing with their professional career, and we need to be confidential in terms of working with their folders and files and working with their interviews. So there's a number of things that ASBA is responsible to guide guiding the process, just like the roles and responsibilities of the district. you'll need to provide that information that I need to seek the right person. You'll need to be present in all the board meetings. This question comes up once in a while. Hey, I missed the interviews, but I can still be part of the decision making, right? Well, that's a board decision. ASBA says if you haven't been there for the interviews, how can you make a good decision? We would say that's not a good idea, but that's a question for each board. And sometimes somebody has to, for a very legitimate reason, miss a meeting. But we would suggest that interviews, everybody needs to be there. And especially when it comes to decision making, everybody needs to be there. So being present, open meeting law is another important aspect of this. You'll find that if you work with me in regards to your search, I'm very sticky when it comes to that. If I see anything that's happening that infringes on open meeting law, I'll advise you, because we don't want somebody to come back and challenge the board later. One thing that I know your HR director is present today. One thing that's important for the board or for the district member is you go through all the hiring process. You do your I-9 verification and such. We will do background checks of the finalists, and we will do personal checks along the way, especially if we don't know a person that is applying. With that in mind, again, there are stages. Now, I mentioned it's a 12, 14, 16-week process. Pardon me. That's if you do a full search. Some boards ask us simply to advertise for them, and they'll do everything else. We don't suggest that's a great idea, but a few districts have decided they want to do that. We can modify our search to not do everything for you, or we can guide the whole process. And as it says there, that takes 12 to 14 weeks. So what do you advertise for? Well, this is just one example in a position profile. And the reason I bring this up is because it's real easy to start talking about all the little different parts and pieces that you want with your new superintendent. But our response is always keep it simple, because if you advertise for a person that's been a superintendent in Arizona in a like-sized district and has 12 years experience in that position and has a PhD, you've just backed yourself into an interesting corner. Because once you advertise for a particular person, you can't change the rules in that regard as you move forward. That's one thing you can't change. Got to stick with what you advertise for. So our recommendation is that you go with items that don't back you too far into that corner, that you leave it wide open, get as many applicants as you have, and in the process of screening to see what experience they have, to see what education they have, to see what they've done in their past. That then narrows the process, and that gives you a better opportunity to make a better decision from our perspective. Also, salary range, I mentioned that earlier. I'm sure you know that we do an annual salary survey. In that salary survey, and this one shows 2019, we've got a 2020, and we'll be going out in September to get the 2021 survey. But our recommendation is you come up with a range that you're going to say you're going to offer the superintendent between X and Y, and that's something you'll have to have discussion on. I don't know what your current superintendent makes, but I do know what like superintendents in like districts make in in Maricopa County and in all of Arizona for a like-sized district. So those comparatives I will have ready for you and provide that information, but you need to make that decision. We'll advertise through our national network. We've got about 80 different universities and colleges across the country we advertise with. We have a lot of sister organizations across the country, all the way from Washington to Florida, and we talk regularly and share information. We advertise with them. We'll be sending your file to them, asking them to put it on their webpage as we do other states around the country. So we can make this as big as possible and get as many people. We also obviously work with our internal universities and organizations like ASBA and of course the Arizona Department of Education. With that, when we screen applicants, again, I mentioned, I will bring every applicant to you. Every applicant that's fulfilled the process, Sometimes we'll have somebody look at a file or begin a profile, but never finish the application process. So anyone who's finished the application process, be that 10, 20, or 30, we'll bring all those files to you. Generally, what I bring, though, is an A and B stack. If you have said that the person that you want has to have a PhD, and I have out of 20 files, I have 10 that have PhDs and 10 that don't, I will tell you, this is the A stack because they have the PhD. This is the B stack because they don't. So I will go through that. I will also do some background work and see if there's anything interesting I find. And once in a while I do. Might find something that is not complementary to a person. Well, you're going to know that. That may be a decision maker for you if I find something that isn't, like I say, complementary. So we'll screen it and then we'll bring it all to you and you'll make some decisions from that point. In the interview preparation, we suggest you do a minimum of 2 interviews. The first interview we suggest is pretty much you get to know the person. Maybe that it's, basic 1 hour, 12 questions type of thing. Talking back and forth and then reviewing it at the board of who provided the best responses to our questions. But then when we look at a second interview, we look at a little divergent approach. Maybe we do some other types of interviews, maybe where we do some role playing, where I challenge them with a pretty significant question. Maybe we have them prepare a PowerPoint ahead of time related to something that's important in the district. The process can change there and should, because it needs to be more aggressive, more taxing, and give you a better reflection. Plus the length of time we should spend in that second interview should be greater, so we have more time to explore with that person, each of the people that you interview the second time, more about who they are. The candidate interviews need to be relatively intense in both instances, first or second. And if you want to go to a third interview, again, as I said earlier, you don't make a decision until you're ready. So if you finish a first interview and let's say you've narrowed it down to 7 people, and then after that first interview, you narrow it down to about 4 people, and you say, well, these are our finalists. And then you interview those finalists, you say, we don't have enough information. Well, that's where the timeline is flexible. Maybe we start a third opportunity for an interview. We need to keep it flexible and move as we move forward. Community participation. Generally, I see districts like to use our online survey. We have an online survey that asks community, I think it's 11 different basic questions where they can respond to things like, what do you think they should bring to the table related to leadership? What do you think they should bring to the table related to management? What should their past history be? What should they have done in the past? Should they have curriculum and instruction experience? Should they have budget experience? And they get to make comments under each question. So if they want to say something about budget experience, they can just type in whatever they wish. And then also the last 2 questions are, what do you think are important things for the district to look at regarding this person, both in a negative fashion and a more positive fashion? How many people will respond to this? It depends. It's up to the district to use your PR director or whoever does your PR work to get the word out. PTSO, booster clubs, community leadership, parents, district-wide. The more input you get, better off you are, because you get more feeling for what your community's thinking. I've seen some of these surveys go as few as 200, 150 participants, and I've seen them go up over 6,000. In a community your size, I'd expect something more in the neighborhood of about 400, but that gives you 400 voices. And having that survey before you do the interviews gives you a better reflection on what your community is looking for. Also, a community forum is often something that boards want to do. Now that's possibly going to be difficult as you move forward because of the Corona issue about bringing big groups together. That may not be something that you can do. However, I worked with the district in March of this year, after March and April, after the closures and all the things began to occur. And we did a community survey, or we did a community meeting online. I had 2 candidates, one from Alaska and one from, where was it? Alaska and Washington, I believe it was. And they were online just like we are today in a Zoom meeting. And I interviewed them and they had a chance to answer questions. And the community was watching this live. The other thing the district did is they recorded it, put it on their website so people could see it after the fact. And then they had an opportunity for people to submit a written statement based on what they saw, what they heard, and how the candidates, were perceived in that forum. Now, hopefully we'll be to a position later on this fall where we don't have to do that. But I think it bears understanding that if we are not beyond today, it may be an opportunity, maybe something that has to be considered. Decision-making, all the big decisions are yours. And I will advise you, the things I'm going to be doing. And I do make some minor decisions, on little things, but you're going to make all the big decisions, and I will rely on you to do that. And then negotiating contracts, as I said, between you and your attorney. My suggestion at this point is your board policy says that your governing board president has the opportunity to be in contact with your attorney. I suggested if you decide to move forward with this and choose ASBA to work on this, that call should be made sooner than later. So at least your attorney knows where you're headed. He has, I think your attorney's Rob Hawes, if I'm not mistaken. He has nothing really to do at this point, but he does need the understanding that we're moving forward in the process and to be ready when it comes to negotiation time. And in the transition plan, I already mentioned, we suspect that it's wise to do this early. We say within the first 6 months, better to do that early because the sooner you can start that process, the better. Now we, as part of a contract, we say we have 1 3-hour training, but that's one already built into the cost of the process, the search process. If you want to go beyond that, then you would work with our team of trainers and maybe set up quarterly meetings or something along the way so that you have a good foundation with your new superintendent as you move forward. With all that said, questions? What questions did I?
I have a question, but I think you answered it. When you talked about determining a salary range, you would bring to us I know we can see the survey that's been done, but you'd bring us like size district salary ranges so we would know what a general idea of what range to set in addition to what we currently have as a superintendent salary scale.
Yes, in fact, if you decide you're going to use it, one of the first things I will do is put together some drafts. I'll put together a draft. The most important one at this point is the draft of the advertising document. And on that draft, I will actually put a salary range.
Okay.
But I say draft in big letters because I will put a number of things in that initial advertising document, but it's your job to decide what you want because all of what I put in can come out or all of what I put in can stay or you can manipulate a half a dozen things, but you have to have a starting point. Right. And if I just give you a blank sheet, it's going to take a long time. Okay. If I give you a projected direction, then you can challenge it and come through that challenging and discussion, you can come up with something that you like. So that not only holds true for the salary range, but everything I put down, you can look at it and say, no, we don't want that. We want this.
Okay.
Steve, this is Beth Hatcher. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, on page 11, the 4th bullet point, it talks about being able to provide you with 3 additional questions for the position. Okay, additional. So where do the first sets of questions come from? Do you all have a template that you'll show us and then we add to that, or how does that work?
Yes, and what you're looking at is the next presentation, am I correct?
I'm looking at page 11 of the PowerPoint that you just went through. That's it's called Superintendent Transitions, Roles and Responsibilities for the District.
Oh,
It's that page.
your page 11 is different than my page 11.
Oh, you know why? Because
what
it's,
threw me. Right here, page 8.
Yeah,
Yeah. We have a standard application form,
okay.
but we want to customize it to help you. So we ask you to, and I would work with you in regards to this. This would be part of the next meeting, actually the first meeting of the search process. I would work with you to come up with ideas that you have of things that are important to you. I'll give you an example. I worked with a district about 7 years ago that was a smaller district, unified school district, but it was surrounded by bigger districts. And those bigger districts had more programs and more opportunities for academic achievement, and also sports, athletics, and club opportunities. So what had happened over time is this district had lost almost a third of their student population in high school to these just two districts that surrounded them, because they were bigger and they offered more. And it was a nice draw to say, hey, you want to come to a larger athletic football team, you want to have a better opportunity in student government, you want to have more clubs, for this academic area, say it's the language club. They just led the district in a sense, and took about a third of their students. So the question that they wanted on their application was to describe what had occurred, and then to simply say, as our new superintendent, what would you do to keep our current student population in high school and to try to draw students back from other districts? Because you lose a third of your high school students. What did you just lose? You just lost a third of your ADM and a third of your budget for that high school. So that was important to them. So I would ask you as a group at the next meeting to talk about what are the 1, 2, or 3 most important things to you. And then we would ask the candidates, or I should say the applicants, to write 350 words. Whatever it is that's important to you that you write. We say, here's your question in 350 words. Tell us your action plan. Tell us your philosophy. Whatever the question demanded, we'd ask them to respond. The important part of that is that we have a very intense application process. It's winds up being about 18 pages because we ask for a lot of information, and that's all good. And I will go through all of that ahead of time and tell you where the anomalies may be. But if you've got specific questions on that application, that's an important thing for each board member to read and talk about and decide who really answered the question or who just threw information on the application, trying to come up with what they thought you wanted, but maybe they're not speaking their real voice. Maybe they're trying to speak what they think you want. And you can tell that when you look at these. So that's where that comes from, Beth.
Okay, thank you. Also on that page, on the second column, the next to the last bullet point, securing all necessary documents. Do you all tell us the documents that you need, or tell HR the documents that you're looking for? Because how would we know?
Yeah, those aren't for me. Those are handled by your HR person. I know you have a new HR person. I think she's online with us today. And that's part of the I-9 process. That's part of just making sure that you've got your fingerprint cards and all your information necessary to make an effective hire. So that's a responsibility of the district, not the board, and that falls on your HR director.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I do have a few questions. You had mentioned that you just finished working with a district in March. Did I hear that correctly?
I I finished, yeah, the last ones I finished were March, April, and I think they went into May.
Are you able to share with us what districts you've worked with recently?
What districts I've worked with?
Recently,
Yeah.
yes.
In fact, I think on the next presentation, I believe those are all listed. Let me pull that up and share that screen with you. Okay. That's not going to get it to you. Let me try that again.
We do have them. They're on that last page.
Yeah, it's the next presentation, the last page. And for some reason, I'm not able to pull that up. I should be pulling that right up, but it's not. Yeah.
The sheet that I'm looking at for 19 through 20 is Humboldt, Mojave, Page, Payson,
Yeah.
Sierra Vista, Wickenburg, and Winslow.
Yeah, those are the ones that I worked with last year. And then you can see, I think I've got the last 10 years up there. 8 or 10 years are on that sheet.
Okay. You mentioned that you just finished up with a district. Which one of those districts was the one that you?
Oh, the last one I finished with was, let me look at the list so I can remind myself. The last one that I finished with was Humboldt. Payson finished before Humboldt. So Humboldt was the last one that I finished this year. I think that was either the last part of, it was either April or the first part of May. But I think now that I think about it, I think it was April that we finished.
Okay. You have referenced that you put together various advertising documents. Are we able to see samples of what some of these documents have so that
Yes,
we
and-
can see content and what exactly it might possibly look like?
Absolutely. In fact, if you decide today that you want ASBA to work with you on this, tomorrow I will be sending out to your district to forward, your district administrative assistant to forward to all board members a variety of different things that apply to the search. And it's basically homework for the board to be ready for the next search meeting. And one of those things that I will provide is examples from other districts and examples of things that you could be looking at. For instance, even though it's quite a ways out, one of the things you have to decide on for interviews is what kind of questions you're going to ask. I will send you, as part of that packet, I'll send you a whole list of about 85 or so ideas for questions. Not that any of them are good for you, but they may be, and some districts use a number of them, and some districts say, well, that was good, at least get my mind going, but here's what we want to ask. So you'd have a whole packet of things to look at before the first meeting to kind of get your mindset as to what you as an individual think is important. So yeah, you will have that information in front of you.
So we're not able to see samples of any of this prior to making a decision?
I yeah,
mean,
if you want, it is, there's an opportunity to make a decision tonight. But sure, I can send anything to you that you'd like to look at ahead of time if that's your choice.
Okay.
Really board opportunity.
It would be helpful to see the kind of documents that you're talking about, because, if we commit to something, we're basically committing sight unseen, and we have no idea really what the scope of any of these documents are that you have referenced. You've also mentioned a community interview. Just exactly who are you identifying as community?
Okay, community, when we speak of community, we're speaking of the full breadth of community, including internal and external community members, internal stakeholders, I should say, and external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are your staff, all levels of your staff, external or all members of your community. If you put out a question, what we call our e-survey, as I spoke to earlier, then our suggestion is send it to everybody. You get as many people responding as possible. If you do a community meeting, it's not an interview, it's a opportunity for the applicants, generally finalists, we get it down to the finalists, to answer questions submitted by the community and respond, hopefully in person. But again, if that can't be done, it may have to be done depending on the COVID problem, might have to be done online as we're working here. So that's who when I say community, that's who I mean.
Now, with these surveys, do you have specific surveys for whichever segment of the community we're talking about? Because the staff or teacher community has a different focus than the garden variety community member.
Yeah, absolutely they do. But no, we have one survey. It does not identify the person, but it identifies, are they responding as a staff member? Are they responding as a community member? Are they responding as a student? But no, it all comes back in one report that comes back to us, and it's presented to the board with, again, we don't take anything out of it. It's all there unless somebody uses language that is inappropriate, and then we will take that out, or unless somebody makes an attack on, it could be a board member, the current superintendent. If it's not appropriate from our perspective due to something like that, or they challenge a particular student could be named or something, those things we take out, but everything you get, and you as your district, the size it is, probably get a 30, 40 page report.
Now, you've already mentioned with the coronavirus or the COVID-19, our district has had a multitude of surveys go out since this pandemic started. Sending out another survey is just another survey. So how are you prepared to draw specific attention to another survey coming out asking the stakeholders in our community to provide, once again, some more information? How do you keep it from just becoming, so to speak, background noise? And it's because this is a big deal to hire a superintendent, and input is very important. And I'm very interested in how you are going to heighten the awareness and the importance and really motivate whoever you're sending this survey to get them to respond.
I think I answered that a little bit ago. That's not something I would do. That's a district responsibility, because you know your district better. You know how you communicate with them already, whether it's Facebook, whether how you get your surveys out, whether it is word of mouth. You know the people to contact as a district. So
we're not providing the contact information for anyone. You'll just provide a survey and tell us to send it out to whoever we want to send it out to.
No, you put it on your website. You advertise that it's on your website. They fill it out. They access your website, fill it out, and then we collect all the data on our end. And the report then is generated and comes back to the board. Contact between teachers and parents, contact between principals and leadership groups in each school and community, principals and staff members, that's all an important part of this. If the high school has a large booster club for the band or something, those principals that work in your schools know those people. You know district, leadership in your community. You have club memberships, or you have other opportunities in terms of your community where you know people, and getting that word out hey, we've got a survey here, we want to collect as much information as possible, is something that has to be generated from the district level, because we would not have those types of contacts from ASBA to your community. So it has to be a district-driven process if you decide to use it at all.
Okay, so from what I've kind of gathered from your presentation, this survey comes out sometime after you've already initiated a search for a superintendent. Did I understand that correctly?
It can come out at any time that the board chooses to. Our suggestion is that it comes out and is completed and the report is back to the board before you do your screening, because it gives you an idea where the community is before you start making those important decisions. So you advertise up front, and at the time you advertise, then you have that out online.
Okay, I'm a little, that kind of presents a little interest. That's very interesting to me, because you've made a point to identify that the community input is important. And of course, the superintendent is, the hiring of the superintendent is the responsibility of the board. And it's important for the board as a whole to be doing our due diligence and very thorough, because the decision that we make will have long-term impacts on the community or on the school district. With that said, if we are asking our community for input as far as what any stakeholder group identifies as something important with regards to characteristics, skill sets, et cetera, for a superintendent, it seems that that survey should be going out much earlier in the process, so that as we are identifying the skills that we're looking for in a superintendent, that can be incorporated into the initial postings for the opening.
You know, that comes down again to decision making, and if the board decides that that's the approach that the board wants to take, that is truly part of the timeline that the board would determine.
Okay. You know, generally speaking, in our district, our governing board does not generate surveys. It's the school district itself. It is the staff of the school district. And so if the school district staff, whoever that might be, is responsible for any portion of the survey, is there a confidentiality issue?
No. You mean, what I'm hearing you say is confidentiality in terms of who is returning these.
Well, either who is returning, you've said that it would be on our website and the responses go directly to your office. But as far as who it's being sent to,
it's blind.
and who it's not being sent to.
No, you're not sending it to anyone. You're simply posting the opportunity. So whoever wants it to, they access it by just accessing a link on your web page. That takes them to the survey. Once they finish the survey, they submit it. The information then is information that is collected in a central location. We don't know who sent it in, but we have all the responses that then a report is generated.
Are we able to get a sample of an actual survey that was sent out to some entity?
Yeah, that will be part again of what, if you decide to use this, that's something I'll send out so you've got it in hand so you can look at it.
So again, these are all, any of the information, examples of anything, we're only able to see it only after we commit?
No, if you decide that you want to see
Okay.
some of these things ahead of time, that's just like the any information that you want to see up front, if you want to wait to make a decision, that really is the direction of the board.
How many people specifically do you have on your staff working on the recruitment and executive searches?
Well, I'm primary. Chris Thomas is our legal counsel, and he helps with any legal questions that may come up. I have an administrative assistant, and we have a person, Tracy Benson, who's charged with leadership training. So she falls into the process also, especially when we get to the training component and the onboarding. Primarily, it's me, and then I rely on those people to help me along the way with the things I need.
So who is the one that's responsible for generating, for instance, advertising materials for this position?
That'd be me.
Steve,
Get all that information that I needed from the board.
Steve, going back to the questions, if I recall, I think you said there are approximately 85 questions, something like that. I'm assuming that in this business, I'm going to use the term headhunter for just so we all understand that what the position entails, that headhunters across the country probably have fairly standard questions, and then each district tailors questions based on the specific needs of the district. Is that right or wrong?
No, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
The question document I mentioned to you is about 80 some odd questions long, and it's divided into categories like management, leadership, and different experiences.
Right. So they would be
you tailor it
industry,
to what you want.
and so like in another industry, these would be sort of industry standard questions, and then we tailor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're speaking, Beth, you're speaking to the interview, am I correct?
Yes. And yes, yeah, the interview.
And like I mentioned earlier, some boards use some of the questions we present, and some boards say that helped us, it made us think, but here's what we really want.
Right. Yeah.
So sometimes the board will make up, for the first interview, 12, 13, 14 of their own questions that are specific to them, because if they're not specific to you in terms of what you want to know, they're not valuable.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I'll move on to item 3.1. Approval of ASBA.
Beth?
Oh, sorry.
Catherine,
Yes.
can I interrupt for a moment, please?
Sure.
Before we do that, that other document that you have in front of you has information on it that we haven't covered, and may be something that, well, in part we've covered it, but maybe something that there's questions on. And that's the one that you have that's titled, let me get back to it, Executive Search Services, Superintendent Search Profile Project. You had a chance to look at that, I assume. I want to make sure that I've answered any questions that may be related to this document. So I would throw that back to you. Is there anything that you saw in that second document I sent that may be a question?
Well, we were going to have you present the second document after we decided to use you or not.
Pardon?
We were going to have you go over the second document after we voted whether or not to approve you as our search agent.
Oh, okay.
But by the second document, you said it's called Superintendent Search Service Profile Projected Cost. Is that what you're referring to, that one?
Yeah,
It's
it's a
about-
Word document. I'm sorry, I can't bring it up for some reason. It just says it has a header.
Yeah, it was item
Executive Services
2.2.
ASBA. It's got Superintendent Search Service Profile Project.
Yeah.
Cave Creek Unified.
Yes. So
Document I'm speaking to.
we did receive that, and yes, it describes your services that you would offer.
One of the important aspects of that document, although some of it is information we've already covered, but one of the important aspects of it is the cost of this. And there is a cost. And I think, let me get to it, I believe I put $9,400 inclusive. And I'll explain why that number is what it is. You've dealt with procurement before with your purchasing department. And there's a threshold. The threshold is $10,000. Once you hit $10,000 on a purchase, you must be competitive with your decision-making and ask at least 3 different organizations to provide a cost. So I put it at $9,400 inclusive of all the things listed in this document, which include getting started with the meeting where we make all the decisions about what you're looking for, draw up a timeline, get kind of our message sent, do all the advertising, then do the screening, then do 2 interviews, then do the onboarding. That's 30 seconds bringing 15 or 13 weeks into view. So I put down $9,400 for that. That is an absolute cost unless you want other things, unless you're not satisfied with what we've written in this document to show you what the process is. So I think that's important to realize. The other thing that's important is to understand that these meetings that we're talking about are not, 30 minutes here and there. There's a lot of work to be done. In the first meeting, the projected timing is 4 hours. As you can see there, day 1 meeting. I've had them last 8 hours. Depends on the board, it depends on the questions, it depends on the direction that the board wants to take. That gets us kicked off. The second meeting is the screening meeting. Generally projected, it's going to be a 6-hour meeting. Interviews are going to be full days. I've had interviews go 8 hours. I've had interviews go 12 hours. It is a long process, and it's a taxing process. By the end of the day, you're tired. If you choose, as some districts have, to interview more than the number of people that you can adequately do in one day, it may be that your interviews, initial interviews, are stretch over 2 days. It could be that your second interview stretches over 2 days. A lot of that depends on the decisions you make as a board and the direction you give as to how you want the interview scheduled, how you want it to be presented to the applicants, and how many applicants you're interviewing at any given time. So I just wanted to make sure that that was an understanding before we moved on, that this is not a simple process. It is it's not rocket science, but it does take time and it is taxing on the board. And by the end of the interview process, on whatever day you might do it, whether you use us or not, you'll feel like you've been through quite a day.
Steve, this is Janet Busby again. I have a question based on the information you just shared regarding how the fees that you were identifying. If we have 4, whatever this $9,400, how many interview dates does that include?
The interviews, that includes 4.
Okay.
That includes 4 meetings. It includes 2 interviews.
Okay, so if
Needed another, go ahead.
in the example that you just gave, where if we have a long day of interviews and decide that we want to break it up into another day, okay, so now we're beyond our 2 days of interviews that was worked into this estimate. How much are you charging for additional days?
If you have, let's say that on the first interview, you have 6 people you want to interview. My response is, you can do 6 people in a day, but that's pretty tough. If you want to break that over 3 today and 3 tomorrow, I'm not going to add another day. When I would add another day is if you get through 2 interviews, an initial interview and a final interview, and then you want a 3rd interview process, that's when that extra interview would kick in. And what the document indicates here, it'd be $500 extra, which would put you at $9,900.
You're saying days, it'd be rounds. So after the second round of interviews.
If you want to do a 3rd round, yeah. I'm not
Okay.
if we have to meet Monday and Tuesday evening to do round 1, we're going to count that as 1 meeting.
Okay.
And that was,
So any of the additional meetings would be an additional $500 per meeting?
That is correct.
Okay. So going into it, we don't really know exactly how much this is going to cost us.
Well, we have a general idea.
Well, but it's an unknown as far as what kind of applicants, how many there are, and how it all plays out. So it is very much we don't know what the bottom line price tag is going to be. It might be $9,400. It might be $14,000.
if we cross over the $10,000 threshold, then do we have issues that we didn't go out and do it correctly through procurement?
You could.
And then something that you had brought up earlier when you were asked about prior year superintendent searches, of the 7 that was noted, were any of those done in what I would consider the mid-school year timeframe, which is what we'd be going into right now?
All of those were a July 1st start.
So interviews and the processes started, I would say, January, February.
The initial conversations like these, November, December.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go to item 3.1, approval of ASBA as the board search agent for new district superintendent. So we will review, discuss, and may consider approval of ASBA as the board search agent for our new superintendent and direct the board president and district administrative staff to assist ASBA during the search process. The governing board, the recommendation is to approve ASBA as the board search agent for a new district superintendent.
So moved.
Second, Rich.
Okay, discussion?
Yes, before I vote, I want to say that it's important to me, given the dynamics in our state in particular with the legislature, funding problems we have, that ASBA has that inside knowledge, and I mean that in a good way, because they've worked with the legislature in trying to enact legislation that's positive for education as a whole in the state of Arizona. So to me, that is something that's unique to them, as opposed to an agency that may be out of state. And I know that there are some.
Any other questions or comments?
I do have a comment. You know, this is a very, very, very important task that we're embarking on. And it is very important that this board does complete due diligence and not make any hasty decisions, because the decisions that this board makes will have lasting impacts on the school district. You know, it's important that, you know, things like our teacher community, our student community, the greater community at large are all taken into consideration. And while, you know, the presentation that Steve provided indicated that he's worked with a number of districts, you know, all of those districts are small districts. They are not our neighboring districts. They're not our neighborhood. They're not around us. I've contacted all of our surrounding districts and most of the districts in Maricopa County who have had a new superintendent put in place in the last 4 years. And by and large, they've all used an outside service, not, when I say outside, something other than ASBA. And I'm not saying that we need to, well, if PV used Ray and Associates, we need to go there, or if Scottsdale was using McPherson and Jacobson, we need to go there. What I'm saying is that we really need to do our homework. We as a board try to make sure we do our due diligence with everything else that we have to vote on. We do our due diligence when we are looking at the budget, when we're looking at curriculum. This is the one and only choice that's being presented to us. And we would be really remiss in our responsibility if we just say, okay, let's sign up. I mean, ASBA may be presenting the best that there is, but we have no way of knowing. And if we can't definitively say, yes, without question, this is absolutely the best opportunity and the best service that we can absolutely have for our superintendent search, if we can't say that, then we're remiss in our responsibilities. And if any of you can say, oh yes, this is the best one, we can't, because we haven't looked at any other options that anybody else could present to us.
Well, for one, Mesa is larger than we are. Gilbert is larger than we are. They were 2017-18.
Well,
Peoria is larger than we are.
I understand that. McPherson and Jacobson also did a superintendent search for Liberty, which only has about 3,500 students. They've also done searches for larger districts and smaller districts. So, you know, to pigeonhole an outside search firm as only an entity that's, you know, focused on very large school districts, that's incorrect. I mean, we haven't gone out and done our homework. And
well, I think that's your right to vote the way you want to. Then, if you don't want to use the ASBA, then we vote.
Well, no, I'm not saying that I don't want to use them, but you're asking us to vote on something, and we have nothing to compare it to.
Well, you clearly checked other districts, so you did compare.
Well, all I did is I went to see what other districts have done, just as a point of reference, which brought up the question, okay, well, if these other districts are using any one of these other possibilities, well, then why is that? Why is it that they chose to do that? We don't know what services anybody else could offer. We don't know how they structure their program. And so we're sitting here being asked to vote on one and only. We haven't been given a choice. There has been no due diligence done. And we have a responsibility to do our homework, and we haven't.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Jim, go ahead.
I just had a clarifying question, since it was a sticking point. How many rounds of interviews is included in that 9,400 price? And what is the average number of rounds that has been the ASBA's history when it comes to finding a superintendent?
Jim, there's 2 built into that cost, an initial interview and then a finalist interview. The majority of districts we have worked with work within those 2 and have been able to make a decision. Sometimes it goes on to 3. I've never seen it go beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say that I did do my own research, and there's a group in Nebraska that I looked at, and I looked at what they had posted in detail, because they had Scottsdale and maybe Peoria. I can't remember. There were 3 of them. So when I compare what I saw, ASBA looks very, very comprehensive to me. And so I just wanted to add that since the topic of due diligence came up.
Well, what you were, I'm assuming, Beth, you were looking at the website for the Nebraska firm.
Yeah,
Well,
What
the
they
cost
had,
of
what they,
Scottsdale's was $36,000.
what any of these search companies have posted is extremely general information. It is the presentation that ASB has just provided us with has provided more information than any of these organizations are going to put on their website, which is what I would expect, because they're not posting information to be a presentation. It's basic general information to pique a possible customer's interest. And where I'm struggling with all of this, where is our due diligence in all of this? Where have we done a comparison? How can we say this is absolutely better? We've done all of our homework when we've only looked at detail for one entity. I mean, ASBA may be the gold standard, but we don't know that because we haven't asked anybody else to give us a presentation.
I don't think there'd be any harm in us, looking at some of these other companies and see if there is something out there. And that's not to say that we wouldn't come back and select ASBA to help us with our superintendent search, but I think it gives us a chance to compare different companies and maybe different processes to see if there's something there that we might like or might like to use. You go out and you look for a house. You don't necessarily buy the first house you look at. You look at different houses, but you may come back to that first house. So I don't see where looking at other options and giving us a chance to compare and see what's best for CCUSD is, I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion to approve ASBA as our search agent.
Could I amend the motion?
Well, you can, but we have to vote on your amendment. What do you want to amend it to?
I would like to make an
Well,
amendment.
actually, no, wait, because member Hatcher presented the motion, member Rich seconded it. We would have to have her approval to amend the motion.
I'm good with the motion as it stands.
Okay, so the motion as it stands is to approve ASBA as our agent. Member Brown,
No.
member Busby,
No.
member Hatcher,
Aye.
I'm an aye, member Rich.
Aye.
Item 2.2, review of agenda items to be addressed at the first search meeting for a new district superintendent, presented by myself, but again, Mr. Highland will actually do the presentation.
Okay, thank you. The first search meeting includes a number of items that need to be talked about. The first item that needs to be talked about and you need to review is the agreement itself. The agreement has been sent to the district. I was asked to provide it so that your district's attorney could look at it. The first 7 or 8 pages has to do with legal boilerplate language. That's for, to keep you safe and us safe, and it's something your attorney has. We've worked with, I believe I mentioned earlier, I think your attorney is Rob Hawes. We've worked with Rob quite a bit in different areas in the past. I've known Rob for about 30 years. If he has any questions related to the document, then I'm sure he'd give me a
Wait.
call.
Let me ask real quick before you go on. Are you talking about the attorney that we've been using? It's Jennifer McClellan. Are you talking about within that same law firm? Would this be would we be using a different person within that law firm?
You could, it's up to you.
Oh, okay.
It depends on your association with the firm. I
Okay,
know Rob is the lead attorney in education law for your law firm, so I just bring his name up in regards to that. We've worked with all the others also.
okay.
Um,
Sorry to interrupt.
So that's one of the first things that we'd have to talk about and go through. Part of that establishes an appendix. And that appendix, there's 3 different phases to it. The first phase has to do with the expectations of what you want us to do and what your responsibilities are also. So we would go through that. They're very close to what I presented today, but that's where we start talking about, is there anything in there you don't want, so to speak? And is there anything you'd like to add that you maybe thought about? And that works both ways, from your perspective and from our perspective. So we'd have to work through that. Then we also talk about the timeline, and we would set a basic timeline. You saw earlier, it takes about 14 weeks, sometimes longer, sometimes a little shorter, but we'd have to establish a timeline for this. That timeline can float, but we know that going into it. And then we also establish that has in it the price tag, which would be the $9,400. Unless you want to go lesser and do things through your HR department that we would normally do, then the price tag could come down. But the $9,400 represents what we call a comprehensive search. That's one of the first things we're going to do. Once we have that done, then we need to talk about the advertising document itself. And that would be one of the things that I will send over tomorrow, a draft. And when you see it as a board member, don't look at it in terms of this is what they're saying we need to do. Look at it in terms of this is what they have presented me, so that I can fill in the blanks and I can change with the board what has been written to be more reflective of the district, because you know your district much better than I, and you know what you're looking at or for much better than I. But I will send you that. I'll send you, as Janet asked, examples of some past things that we've done, so that you can take a look at what other districts have looked at. You need to see what the advertising document looks like, because you have an opportunity to add more questions to that advertising document. You need to also, or application, I should say. You also need to start talking about community participation. You need to talk about, as we spoke here earlier, about the e-survey. Do you want to use it? If so, you want the administration to be able to tell you how they're going to get the word out to make sure you get as much input as you can. Because if you put it out and you don't pitch it and you get 30 people responding, you've wasted your time. You want to make sure that it goes out to as many people as you possibly can. And that means you have to get the word out because they access it themselves. And again, I kind of went over that earlier. It's students involved. You want to get parents involved. You want to get district leadership involved. You want to get community leadership involved. So it's a canvassing to make sure that happens. And you also want to talk about, you want to have a community meeting if it's at all possible at that stage of the game, depending on the timeline and depending on COVID. So those are the basics of what we need to talk about at the first meeting. Also, every time we have a meeting, we need to talk about what the second meeting is going to be, so that you're ahead of the process. The worst thing that can happen is you come to me and you say, as an individual, as a board, we didn't know that, we didn't understand that. So making sure you understand where we're headed, making sure you understand all the components is my job, and helping you as an individual and as a board make sure you know where you're headed, and there aren't any questions later. No surprises is the general rule. So that's basically what the first meeting looks like. Like I said, I've seen boards get through it in a little less than 4 hours. I've seen boards take a full 8 hours to get through that. Generally, where the time is spent is talking a lot about what they want to look for in a superintendent and coming up with those basic concepts. Again, I'll remind you, it's good conversation. In fact, it's great conversation. But don't refine that aspect of the advertising document to a point where you back yourself into that corner and you don't have all the applicants you'd like to look at when it comes time to start the screening process. Questions? Let me also mention something. I know that this was a split decision, and that's going to occur, and that's part of the process. I worked with, just so you know a little bit about my background, and it's not on the agenda, but I'll just caveat into it for just a second so you understand what I'm going to say after that. And as I worked about 34 years in public education. I did the normal routine. I was a teacher, I was a principal, I was a district administrator. I retired, I went to ASBA, I've been there 11 years. So I've worked with a lot of boards, and I understand that you don't always agree with things. One of the efforts that I have to make is to try to work with you so that there's a common understanding that, as has been stated by more than one of you, the most important job you have is to hire a new superintendent. And we want to get to a point where at the end, you're all satisfied that you've done that. If you're not all satisfied, you haven't done that, then it starts to erode the process. We don't want to be there. So with that said, I want to mention in the contract itself, there is an opt-out, or in the agreement, it's not a contract, it's agreement, there is an opt-out clause. So anytime during this process, if you become unhappy with me or become unhappy with ASBA, there's an opt-out process. You can give us 5-day notice for cause, and you can give us notice for no cause at all. You just want out. So if that's the case, then you get billed for what we've done to that point, and you move on, and so do we. So I want you to know that the binding part of this, you have a very clear five-day notice opt-out at any given time you're unsatisfied with what I'm doing or what we're doing. And if it comes down to me and you want to keep ASBA, then I'll get you to the right people, which would be Tracy Benson, to reassign this to somebody else if for some reason I wasn't meeting your need. I haven't gone through that in the past, but you know, day ain't over yet, as they say.
Do we have any questions?
Dave, I would like to make a clarification. You know, you indicated this was a split decision, and in no way, shape, or form was I indicating that I was dissatisfied with ASBA. I was advocating for this group to do some additional homework. And of course, if it ended up being ASBA as our, for lack of a better way of putting it, our search engine, that I'm totally okay with that. I just, because this is such a monumental and important decision, I want it to be very clear. I was not bashing ASBA in any way, shape, or form, and I don't want you to think that I'm the negative Nelly here. I have a responsibility as a board member, and it covers a lot of areas, and I don't want to be remiss in my responsibilities. That's why I made the comments that I made, and I certainly am going to repeat it again. I don't want you to think that I was being negative toward ASBA in any way, shape, or form. I'm looking forward to all of the opportunities you will be bringing to us for potential superintendents.
Janet, I appreciate that, and that didn't take it away at all. Was referring to was a 3-2 vote, and that's fine. I think that the cause now is exactly what you said, that we move forward, and you know, the board does it as a group, and that's what I was referring to. I wasn't referring to, I didn't take it negatively at all. In fact, you made good points. I think Scott also had the same reflection, and I don't have any problem with that. If it would have been the other way around, I would have told you, you know, go look at them. We hope you come back to us. So no, I didn't have that reflection at all, Janet. And if I even sounded like I was reflecting on that, I apologize. That wasn't my intent.
Well,
I was just saying, I just wanted to lead up to that point where I was saying, you know, I understand that it's difficult. I understand that It was a little different reflection on that. But I wanted you to know that when you choose us, the agreement itself gives you that opportunity. If somewhere along the line the thought changes, you can change your thoughts as a board. So no, I look forward to working with you all. I think you've got I know your district a little bit. I know you've got a good history behind you, and I know that you've got a lot of good things going. And I think that you're going to see a lot of interest in this position because you are a good district. You've got a good history. You've got a lot of good things to look forward to.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions just to clarify the timeline on and
Wait, Scott, before you go, everyone else but Scott, can you guys mute just so we can hear his questions and we don't hear paper? I did it too, but if just since Scott's questioning, if you can just temporarily mute. Sorry, Scott, go on.
That's okay. Just a couple of questions, just so I'm kind of clear with the process, I guess. You provided quite a bit of information tonight. I'm assuming that somebody had contacted you from the district. Was that our current superintendent or was it Member Hill?
Your superintendent contacted me initially and said that you were going to be looking. I did have had conversations with Catherine about this meeting. Those are the, well, I had conversations with Mark in regards to setting up the meeting and how it's going to work in the Zoom. So those are the three people in the district prior to this meeting that I've talked to at this point.
Now that
your administrative assistant, Julia, I forgot to mention.
Now that the board has approved ASBA, is there any restrictions on board members that, like, if I'm looking through like a survey question or some of that interview information, if I have a question, am I allowed to contact you directly with my question, or is this like there's only certain people that can communicate with you?
No, please, if you have anything as an individual board member, you call me. There's no question that isn't a good question when it comes to this process. So anything I send you, anything you see, anything you reflect on tomorrow that you didn't hear today or heard today that you want more information on, you give me a call, send me an email. I'll put in the message I send Julia tomorrow related to the different pieces and parts of this for the next meeting. I'll ask her to provide that, and it'll have my my cell phone number on it, and it'll have my email on it. Just call me. The worst thing you could do is not. I want you to be totally informed. Now, that said, keep in mind that with open meeting law, you can't daisy chain things. So, you know, if Jim gets a hold of me and says, hey, what about widgets? And I answer the question, he can't get online with the rest of you and say, hey, I asked Steve this, and here's what he said. And if the, you know, and in many instances, what I will do is if I get a question, you know, what appears to be something that is very rooted in foundation, I can communicate with all of you at any given time I want. I don't have that restriction. So let's say Jim's question is one of those that, wow, yeah, that's a big question. I'm gonna send the question out that, hey, by the way, all governing board members, I was presented with this question and here's the answer. So you're not gonna be hidden from anything, you know, that I get. If somebody calls and say, now, did you say that's really gonna be 14 weeks? I'm probably not gonna send you that one as a group. Yeah, it's gonna be about 14 weeks. But if it's a substantial question, you're all going to get that information. And along the way, just so you know, along the way, I will be sending emails out to all of you. Probably send it through Julia. She can respond to all of you then, updating you where we're at. Like, okay, for instance, let's say we say September something is the first day we're going to have this application online. You'll know it went online. I'll advise you all of that. After the first week, if we've got 10 applicants, I'll advise you of that. I'll keep you posted along the way as a group too. And you can always send me an email and say, I didn't understand the email. What did you mean? But remember, don't hit send to all. Just hit send to me, because if you do, you're daisy chaining again. You don't want to do that.
And then you referred just recently to an agreement. We're not really doing a contract with you, but we're doing an agreement. So will we now have that document then tomorrow? That was the document I think you referred to with the opt-out clause in it.
Yeah, I'll have that to you tomorrow so you can see it. The board has to approve it, and what you'll approve is you'll approve it to form at the first meeting if you choose to. You can always say, no, we don't choose to approve it. But if you approve it to form at the first meeting, with the caveat that we're also working on those appendix, you've got the timeline and those other things that need to be put in place. And then you also, with the agenda item that I provide, and I do write agenda items so that that doesn't fall on the district, Julia puts it in the format that you're used to. But then you also give the board president the authority to sign that document once it's completed. That's just a normal process. And if you want two people to sign it and look at it after the process, you can have two people do that, or you can have the whole board look at it and then give the board president the opportunity to sign it or the approval to sign it.
Now, some of the preliminary discussion that the board needs to have just to set our parameters of what we're looking for, is that something that should be done in an executive session, or is that something that should be done in general meeting?
That cannot be done in executive session. There's only 7 things that can be done in executive session generally, although the state added one more that we haven't put out yet in a policy advisory. We'll be doing that probably in end of July, 1st August. Having those discussions does not. What does fall under executive session is the interviews and the decision-making related to, not the decision itself, but the conversation related to who moves on in the interview process. Now, there is a caveat to that also. The law is very clear on this, that if you are interviewing a particular person, let's say you're interviewing me for the position, I have the right to demand, and that's the word used in law, that interview be held in open session. So I've had that happen once in the last, 7, 8 years. I've had it only happen once for somebody wanted to have their interview in an open session.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve,
Oh, sorry.
going back to the question, the question that Scott asked about questions, I'm trying to understand how that would be a violation of open meeting laws, because we, right now, we have the ability to ask the superintendent questions, and she puts it out to all of us, but we don't discuss it prior to coming public. So how would this be different?
It's not. It's the same thing, and maybe I didn't phrase it correctly. Think of me just like, in this instance, just like the superintendent. I can put out anything I want to all of you. You should not be talking to each other about it outside of a board meeting.
Right, okay.
It's not an open meeting law violation if Scott sees Jim in the market and says something, but as soon as 3 people have linked in, you've got an open meeting law violation. So it's the same thing that you're referring to.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So if you got, like, let's say you get questions from us and they're not like the, did you really mean 12 weeks or 13 weeks? But like you said, substantive questions. Would you send to all of us those questions? Like, these questions were asked, this is my answer, and it would be something that we would receive, but not reply to in a group?
Yeah, I can do that. I can send everything, even if it's a simple question like 14 weeks. Generally, I send substantial questions out, but yeah, I can. That's part of what I normally do.
Our protocols, if a board member asks, we need to have them sent. We need to have the questions. We don't reply to them, but have the questions in your answer need to be sent to all of us for anything, probably just to maintain transparency that all of us are seeing everything at the same time.
Yeah, it's important that you all know where each other's at. It's just equally as important not to talk about it until we get to a board meeting.
Right.
So, yeah. Transparency is important in this process between all of us.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
For your community to understand.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hyland.
Thank you.
Item 3.2, addition of a special meeting to the 2020-2021 Governing Board calendar presented by myself. You can see I'm proposing we add a special meeting of our board for Monday, August 3rd from 5 to 9. For the purpose of the new superintendent search, that would be that first meeting that he talked about that could go potentially 4 hours plus. The reason I suggested 5 o'clock is because I would like to, if we can start at 5 and be done by 9, that would be really nice. I think starting at 6 for us, I think going to 10, whether or not we are in person or via Zoom is going to be, it's going to be a long haul anyway, but the reason I suggested 5 o'clock, which is a different time than we normally do, is just to allow for a full discussion. And also if we end it before 9, we're not necessarily, we can of course vote to go over that, but I just thought maybe if we started at 5, we could get started sooner and just be a little fresher, knowing that this is going to be a very long meeting. So the governing board, I move that we approve, or I would suggest that we recommend that we approve the addition of a special meeting to the 2020-2021 governing board calendar of August 3rd, 2020 from 5 to 9 p.m.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
So Catherine, Steve has left, hasn't he?
I'm going to assume this isn't really something he would be involved in. This is more of our discussion of just adding a meeting to have that first meeting that he put in his.
Right. So at that meeting, if we add it, will he receive, or can you request that we receive anything we're going to discuss like we do in a board book ahead of time so we can hit the ground running?
Oh, absolutely. I can make sure so we have ample time to know what we're doing. Absolutely. I can make sure that we would definitely, we wouldn't be coming in.
So
Yeah.
we'll have an agenda and whatever.
That'll be an agenda. It'll just be
documentation we need.
Yeah, it's a meeting that is only going to be doing the superintendent search. It's not going to be piggybacking on
Right.
a regular board meeting.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
That Monday, that's the Monday of the week that school is scheduled to start.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can maybe look at a different date? Because I think that's going to be a busy time, especially board members that have students in the district.
Well, to be honest, it's going to be online. Unless something changes, we're going to have to do it by Zoom because at this point, we're not even going to be in person in school based on the COVID thing. But the reason I selected the 3rd is the 10th is a regular governing board meeting and the 24th. So if we're wanting to start this search in a timely manner, that is the day that, if we keep meetings on Mondays, which is a little more consistent, that's why I suggested that day. It gives us 3 weeks. Let me look at my calendar. That'd be 3 weeks from today that we would have information to start, because we're going to need to start, these meetings that we're going to have are going to be very long and we need to start the process now. That's 3 weeks to look at material and be ready to go. And frankly, I'm one of 2 board members that has a kid, and starting on Monday the 3rd really doesn't interfere with her online start of school on the 5th. To me, I can't speak to Member Rich.
I'm fine with it. I have 2 students in the district. I'm fine with it.
Here's, Scott brought up an interesting point, I guess. And starting online, it's really, there is no disruption to much of anything. Although, since we're starting online and this is going to be a totally 100% different start to school than any of us have ever seen. And it may present some unique issues, it may not. But here's the thought. Could we have have the meeting a day or 2 after the first day of school, in the event that there are some unique issues that come up that may be pertinent to our superintendent search?
Well, that would be the next Monday. That would be a governing board meeting we already have. If we pushed it out another week, now we're waiting another 5 weeks and it feels like we're stalling.
How about if we
because to be honest, the board, the only people that are gonna be involved in these meetings going forward are the 5 of us, Ms. Scotto, because she'll be taking minutes. If it is online, well, in regardless whether or not it's online or whatever, Mark will be making sure that it is streamed either with us present or online. The rest of the district will not be involved in this. So whether or not something is going on in the teaching level is not going to affect the 5 of us, Ms. Scotto and Mark.
Oh, I understand that. What I had said is this is the start to this 2021 school year is going to be a unique start because it's not anything we have ever done. There may be something that crops up that would be a pertinent skill set or something that would be pertinent to whomever we are trying to identify to fill the role of superintendent, to be at, that skill set be added into the mix for what we're looking for. I'm just asking that as, trying to be as thorough as possible. And yes, I'm not trying to stall. I'm trying to be very conscientious about making sure we dot all of the I's, cross all of the T's, and identify any potential areas that could impact what we are tasking ourselves to do.
Okay, well, I'm gonna call the question then. I think take that into consideration when you vote. The proposed item is to have the meeting at 5 o'clock on Monday, August 3rd, to discuss the superintendent search. Member Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Member Hatcher?
Aye.
Member Busby?
I,
Member Brown?
No.
Okay, sorry, old business, we don't have any. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Catherine, President Hill, can I just say something real quick?
We can't,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
we've already, yeah, I
okay,
mean, we've moved to the,
sure.
do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
So in favor of adjournment, Member Brown,
Aye.
Busby,
I.
Hatcher,
Aye.
Hill. Before I go, Janet, that was you making the motion, correct? I was looking.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm an aye. Member Rich.
aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.